This was one that I didn't really play much of at the time, but it's one of those that sure enough popped up on a lot of the collections that over the years, and I actually ended up getting this in a lot of Sega Genesis games I bought several years back, and that was one of the first times I really sat down and played it. I made it through this one, but up till the playing through for this podcast, I probably made it just a few screens in this game in the past. This is one that I played a few times, got kind of easily frustrated, and always just sat to the side, but always came back to it because, as we'll talk about it, it's a pretty unique game. It's got a lot going for it.
Yeah, I this came out like in '95, I think.
Yes.
So I wasn't really paying too much attention to Super NES and especially Genesis games at the time, but I do remember seeing it and looking at the back of the box and be like, that looks kind of weird. I mean, they're going for this whole comic book aesthetic and really trying to sell it. It's not like the graphics are just, they're trying to be comic booky. Like you are literally playing on the pages of a comic book. So I always thought that was kind of neat, but I never rented it. I never got around to playing it. So this was actually the first time for me actually sitting down and wanting to play it or trying to play through it rather than getting it on one of those Genesis collections and playing it for 3 minutes and being like, oh God, this is incredibly hard and I don't want to play this anymore. So this would be my first time actually trying to go through it.
And that's exactly my experience with the game. I never played it before. It's an interesting box. But it came out in '95, so that's when everyone was switching over to the 32-bit systems. So this was always one of those. Yeah, it looks neat, but I've played my fair share of Genesis 2D brawler sort of games. I'll come back to it at some point, but it's on I have it on the Sonic's Ultimate Collection on the 360, and I'm pretty sure it's on the new Sega collections for the PS4 and Switch. And I think Xbox One. I think it's on all the systems. So you can easily find this game in a fully licensed format. It's also on the whatever that Sega Ages on the iPhone. I think you can get it for free if you're willing to deal with some ads. So it's real easy to find yourself a copy of this. Although on a phone, this is probably completely unplayable.
Yeah.
Last episode, Billy, you had mentioned that you're a sucker for a good gimmick. And I am 100% a sucker for a good gimmick if it's flair. Like I don't necessarily like I like a gimmick for gameplay, but if there's something that's like stands out visually with a game, it's immediately going to get me to at least try it. If it looks like it's made out of clay, I'm there. If it looks like it's hand drawn, I'm there. All those Yoshi games where it's like yarn, there, 100%. So this game, the fact that the whole name would imply Comix Zone, the entire game looks like it's drawn. Hand-drawn comic. You're going from panel to panel. You see parts where actually some of the things on the screen, enemies you fight, are actually hand-drawn in while you watch. I mean, it's pretty cool for a gimmick. And you're right. This game does have a lot to offer. It has a lot of neat little things, but Jeremy's also right. It's incredibly frustrating, and it has some real big drawbacks. You said you finished it, Billy. I got very, very far. Jeremy, did you get far in this one or not?
I got to, I believe it's the second to the last stage. It's not the ship level, but the one before it. The desert. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the stage before the last one. Okay,
so we did play through most of this game. Much like Billy said before, when he played this at first, he got maybe 3 or 4 screens in. Yes, I think I had the exact same experience, even literally up to the last few days when I really just sat down and played this a whole bunch. This game, you have one life. This is one of those games where you have a life bar and one life, but unlike those games, there's also many ways that you can die instantly, which is not a good time. There are no continues in this game until you've beaten a boss. Once you've beaten a boss, you earn 1 continue. There's only 3 bosses in the game, so you can earn 2 continues before you finish the game. And if you don't have a continue and you lose your life, even if you're on the screen before the last boss, you have to start the entire game over again. It's a fairly short game once you know what you're doing. I think you can find not even speed runs, just full plays of this game are under half an hour. If you know what you're doing and you know some of the, not necessarily shortcuts, but there are paths in the game. You can go several different ways to get from the start of the level to the end of the level. If you know how to streamline your paths and you kind of know when things are coming up, you can get through this in half an hour without too many issues as far as other than some random deaths that I think even if I knew what I was doing, I still would have died a handful of times without any control over it. One of the things I noticed about this game from the get-go is it's one of the few Sega Genesis games that really is made for that 6-button pad. You can play on a 3-button pad. I don't know if either of you tried to play with 3 buttons instead of 6. But essentially the bottom 3 buttons are jump, attack, and block. And the top 3 buttons use one of 3 items. And as you find items in the level, they pop up at the top of the screen. They show you, left from right what they are based on X, Y, Z. But if you don't have a 6-button pad, you have to hold down that block button and then hit one of the other buttons in a direction or something to use those items. I think that would make the game completely unplayable. Not even worth attempting.
No, I have never played it, but that was the thing. I think with a lot of Genesis titles, once they kind of put that 6-button controller out, they put out several games. That Eternal Champions we reviewed being one of them that just were very unpleasant. Not impossible to play. There's always the alternate control scheme in the instruction panel, but just obviously made to want you to run out to the store and grab that 6-button controller. And I can't see dealing with it the way you're saying there. I can't see it, because this is a game that is difficult enough on its own without the added handicap of that.
Well, guess which way I played it.
Oh, no.
Are you kidding me?
It was, it's doable. I played it with the 3-button pad, or the 3-button setting or whatever, because I didn't actually know. This is the first time I'm learning that it's a 6-button game. I just figured it was a 3-button game. I didn't get to look at the instructions or anything like that. So yeah, if you're wanting to use an item in that with 3 buttons, you just press a button and he looks in his pocket. And then you have to use the D-pad back and forth to highlight which one you want to use, and then use the button again to activate it. Which, for the most part, the game isn't fast action. It's not a bunch of fast action, so you're not really throwing things out in the heat of battle a lot of times. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, like just putting your rat down or using a health potion or something like that, it's not too bad. But yeah, if you need to use something in an instant, which it definitely kind of gets that way towards the end of the game. If you have something that you need to throw out to clear the stage or the section that you're on, then it gets hairy. And I can totally see where a 6-button pad would make that a lot more doable.
That must have been incredibly frustrating. I thought even with 6 buttons, there were parts where even though it's labeled clearly on the top of the screen, left to right, X, Y, Z, I still hit the wrong button, and you would use an item. And for the most part, items are one use only, except for that rat. Mm-hmm. So that can make it so that when you can be flying around at a good clip, think you know what you're doing, and all of a sudden you make a mistake using an item you thought you needed for something else. I'm getting way ahead of what I want, how I wanted to go through this game. The game itself looks like comic panels. The story of the game is you are the poorly named sketch turner. You're a comic artist and rock and roll star. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but it tells you that in the manual. You get zapped into your comic when lightning strikes your studio, and it makes you and the evil villain of your comic, Mortis the mutant, switch places. So he comes out into the real world and you are stuck in the comic, but he can only stay in the real world if he kills you. So he makes you go through your comic, drawing monsters in the way to stop you, while you, on the other hand, are going through your comic to get to the end to fight Mortis the mutant and save the day. The game is as we said, it's kind of short. It's only really 6 levels. Levels are really it's 3 acts, 3 episodes. Night of the Mutants is the one you start on, one called Welcome to the Temple, and one called Curse of the Dead Ships. Essentially, that's just the end. The end of each episode is a boss, so 3 bosses, 6 levels total. Each level is, if you think of them in panel, each room or panel, because some of the panels are longer than one screen. They're 5 or 6 panels maybe per level?
Yeah.
I believe it's like 1 page, isn't it? Like you would count 1 page per section.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's not. Yes, you're right. It's about 1 page.
It's not
per section.
a set number of panels. Like the panels can be different sizes during that page, but as you make your way down the page, each section is a total of 1 page. Right,
and in each section, whatever you're supposed to do, whether it's fight an enemy or figure out a puzzle, because there's a good deal of puzzles in this game, or in some cases just get to that page and watch a little not a story, but get a little bit of text from someone who's helping you out and speech bubbles and maybe grabbing an item. And then it gives you arrows that sometimes are multiple directions off the page, off the panel onto other panels. So there are multiple ways through most of these levels. But sometimes it's just one arrow. Go to one screen to the right, finish that screen. The only arrow is right, so go to that to go to the next screen. And that's how you progress your way through the story and through the level to get through these 6 levels. As I said, you only have 1 life. You do have a fairly sizable life bar, and things don't do a whole lot of damage to you at once. However, and this was an immediate thing I noticed that I was like, how do I keep dying? I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not getting hit that often. Sketch has a problem where a lot of his levels require him to either punch a box or break open a door or any of these things that you don't have any other way around. You can't just open the door. You have to kick it open and go over and punch it or whatever. And so when you go and start punching an inanimate object, you can see that you're taking damage as if you were being hit by an enemy. I don't think there's any way to avoid it. I mean, other than using an item, and we'll get to the items in a second, but unless you have an item on hand that will help you. For example, if you have to blow up a bunch of boxes and you have dynamite, you can put the dynamite on the boxes, it blows them away, it doesn't hurt you, but it still means that there's plenty of places where there are no items, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting enough items. And so you kind of have some where you might be doing really good, then all of a sudden you have to go through a room where you punch a whole bunch of things, especially towards the end, and you can go from almost a full life bar down to under half.
It's inexcusable. When has that ever fucking happened in another game like this? I mean, a side-scrolling beat 'em up. This is essentially what it is. You take away the comic book, panel gimmick to it, and I mean it's another beat 'em up, and that is just it's fucking ridiculous. And it's like you said, it would be different if there was always an abundance of items beforehand, but there's not. And there's some parts of the game where if you're low on health and you're moving around and you see this obstacle in front of you, you're like, fuck, I am going to have to take a hit. And you might be in the spot where you can't. And yeah, it's just in a game that is already erring on the difficult side. This is just, it's cheap to the point of being inexcusable, in my opinion.
I got to, I believe it's towards the end of the second stage, and I was just hanging on to a sliver of life. And I got past this one panel, and there was this, it's a big spike, a big log spike that's blocking the way. And I didn't have any health potions, and all I could do is just hit that spike, and I couldn't hit it enough before I died. So I was literally just hitting. There was no other way around it. My rat wouldn't do nothing, because sometimes you can pull out the rat and he can find a switch on the other side or something like that. But there was nothing. All I could do was just kick or hit at this thing and hope that it breaks. But I didn't have enough power to do it. I would literally die hitting a log that's in front of me. And for a game this hard, it's even more. I don't know. It sucks the life right out of you to get that far. And then to just die trying to clear the path in front of you by hitting a log over and over. It just sucks.
Well, there were some places where I thought, well, maybe I just didn't have the right item. Like I didn't look the right place. There's some items hidden or items you can only obtain through certain things. Like if there's multiple ways to get through a fight, for example, let's say you have just a regular fight. There's not many enemies in this game overall. Like the number of enemies, different types. I think there's a total of 8. But the fights are also not completely mindless. You're not going to have any one-hit enemies like Kung Fu. You're not going to walk to the right and punch 75 guys that run at you. You'll only run into 1 or 2 guys in most of the rooms, if that. But all the fights take a little bit longer. You've got a good amount of trying to hit them where they aren't blocking, meanwhile, or dodging projectiles if they shoot them at you. So the fights are all a little substantial. Even the simple ones aren't completely a cakewalk. But there are some places where if you fight an enemy and you beat him by fighting, he'll drop an item. But if you beat him by, I don't know, using a grenade or something, if it's an item you have, they don't drop that item. So there's ways their items are hidden that way. The rat that we mentioned, you have a pet rat you can find in pretty much every level. He's the only item you have that when you use that item, he comes back. If you can go and pick him up again, he goes right back in your inventory. There are rooms, and I didn't know this, where you just drop the rat to the ground and he'll find hidden items and like scratch through the page. Looks like he's ripping the page and an item will fall out of it. There was lots of those. I didn't know about that till the last set of levels in the game when I noticed it. And I was like, oh man, I wonder if that's why all these areas I got stuck in. But But yeah, so in a room where you have to get through these obstacles, some of them are easy puzzles. Push a box over, you'll find a lever, you have to hit the lever, or it's, you'll see like a fan. This is early in the game, so there's like a big fan that's spinning, and there's an explosive box you can see. So obviously you can push that box into the fan, cause the fan to explode. Great, you've gotten rid of both things in your way. You don't take any damage. It's a simple puzzle, but it's a neat idea that you could do that, or you could, I guess, just go up and punch it a bunch, take a lot of damage, and eventually break the fan. So there's ways to get through these rooms that don't involve you hurting yourself, but like I thought maybe it was that I was punching boxes and I need to kick them, because if you push down an attack, you kick. No, like I don't know, there should have been some other method to say, fine, if you don't have an item and you're low on life, here's a safer way to break these objects by kicking them. Maybe it takes longer. Maybe it's like you have to be at a certain distance, but no, there's nothing. Either you use an item or you take damage, and that's super rough. And then you add that into the fact that there are some parts of the levels, and there's not many. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 sections of the entire game where you have to do a jump of some sort or fall to your death. There's no coming back. It's not like you take a little bit more damage and reappear on the other side. Nope. Instant death. Hopefully you have it continue. Otherwise, that's your day. Go ahead and start from the beginning again, Sketch. Have a great time.
God damn, how bad is it that one bad move, one misstep, one mistimed jump doesn't mean you go back, just the beginning of the area, but it's the end of the game. One time, one life. That is an odd choice to make in a game, especially a game that's got some, like I said, it's got some difficulty to it, and one life, no continues until you made it beyond the first boss. I mean, this is the very reason that this game perpetually only got played 5 minutes at a time by me over a span of 20 plus years. I couldn't stomach it. I could not take trying to play through this game just with those limitations in place. I just didn't want to bad enough. I needed something like reviewing it for this to motivate me to try to push through that. And I don't know. I think maybe that's a problem for a lot of people. You kind of come for the look of it and the gimmick it has going, and it's pretty damn cool seeing your character go from panel to panel and seeing those enemies get sketched in. But then there's this other side of it where it is just a frustrating game and a lot of unfair mechanics to it, as far as the like we just talked about, the having to take damage sometimes, and now just to have the one life that you can lose easily, very easily. And I will admit that there, in my playthrough of this, to get through to the end, especially my damn playthrough the first damn level, there was some save stating involved. There was a large, healthy amount of it involved. I could not see myself getting through this on the console.
I think this is like a perfect example of one of those games that is super short, so it has to make it as hard as possible.
Yeah.
Like, we played Battletoads, and that's a decently long game for an NES game, but it's still hard as nails. But there were a ton of those games where it was super short, and it was also impossibly hard. And this game is totally just that. It is a very, very short game. You were talking about like long plays of it just being maybe a little over half an hour. Yeah. I mean, if you play through it, that's probably how long it's going to be. And you don't have to be very good at this game. That's just how long it's going to take if you play through it. But yeah, it is just every single thing that it could possibly be to be unforgiving is in there, including not having the decency to refill your health bar between sections. It does after a boss.
Yeah.
But going from page to page in those sections, like stage 1-1 and then on to 1-2, it does not actually refill your health. So you have to go through an entire stage, which isn't easy, without losing all of your health, unless you have a health potion, which those don't come around often, even with the rat.
They don't.
So you're just stuck.
And it ended up becoming kind of this unenjoyable thing where I would play through, and then once I made a mistake and took a few hits and took some damage, I'd start over. And that kind of gameplay, it doesn't really lend itself that well to me. I mean, I don't mind games now. I mean, I'm playing Hollow Knight right now, which is a game where you're going to die several times over, and you're going to come back and go through parts. But there is you level up on there. I mean, you kind of gain different abilities, and you come through areas that were hard before in there, and now they're not so hard. Either that, or you've kind of mastered some technique, and now you can breeze through. But that was just never the case with this thing. I just found myself, more than anything else, just having to memorize as much as I could, and just kind of try to make this perfect run through, because I was just so paranoid when I took a few hits. I didn't want to keep playing longer and longer just to have to restart over anyway. And that kind of paranoia in a game, just it doesn't set well with me. I think it really kind of detracted from the enjoyment I had playing through this.
One of the cool things the game does, but also is very frustrating, is the items you get. You have 3 item slots. You can hold up to 3 items at one time. If you get another item, it drops an item you already have. It makes you pick up the new one. Some of the items are self-explanatory. Like the mouse we already talked about, it's not self-explanatory, but he's kind of a side character you can keep using, but that means he uses up one of your inventory slots.
Yeah.
They have potions that refill half of your life, which is... I think if those potions would have refilled all your life, perhaps that would have made this slightly easier. But the fact that they only do about half of your life, and in some cases just punching you out of a room is going to take half your life away, seemed a little rude. You have a knife. When I first got the knife, I was excited because I was like, okay, cool, I got another weapon. So I used it for the first fight, and of course you throw it one time and it goes away. Bayou Billy style, that's it. So you get one attack of your knife. It's not like it flies across the screen and drops to the ground. You can pick it up again. Nope. One shot. Almost all the items in this game, except for the mouse, are one shot only, which is very, very frustrating. You get dynamite. That is exactly what you think it would be. You throw it in front of you in a small area. It does a lot of damage. Again, when I figured out that most of these rooms were puzzles and not necessarily an action game, you can use it as a weapon, but it's not great as a weapon. You should use it as a way to clear out things like giant rooms of boxes you need to get through. Grenade is kind of the same situation. You can use it against bosses or enemies. It does a good amount of damage, and you do throw it kind of across the screen, but it's also better to use to clear out some of these rooms. I will warn you that both of those explosives do a lot of damage to you if you're next to them. So there were definitely times where I thought, okay, I'll clear the room with dynamite, and I thought I was far enough away, and I was not, and I died and had to start again from the start of the game because I was 3 pixels farther than or closer than I should have been to a dynamite explosion. You get a fist icon. I don't know quite why, except that you're a comic book hero, so this makes sense, I guess. If you get the fist, it's only good for doing damage to enemies. It doesn't do any damage to the background, and it makes you turn into like a superhero character, and I thought it was like, okay, cool, I get to turn into a bigger guy that does more damage and stuff. No, it just does a lot of damage to the screen, and then you turn right back into Sketch. It does, so it's just a really cool-looking area effect item, but it only has one use. And then the only other item you can find in the game is a question mark. You find them more towards the end of the game. A question mark is any of those items above you, although according to the manual, it also means it could do damage to you at random, which I never had happen to me, so I don't know if that's an idea they got rid of the game because it was too much. But if I would have gotten towards the end of this game on a regular playthrough, not a Sonic's favorite collection with save states, but literally the cart version, I get to the last couple levels, I pick up a random item hoping for life, and it explodes. I would have broken the cartridge in half with my bare hands. I would have been furious. That would have been the final straw for my Genesis as well.
It's just a rude game. I mean, it's just one of those. They just really try to make it as hard as possible, and it would almost be unforgivable if this game wasn't so damn cool. Like there's just, like you said, you love you some gimmicks. Yeah, me too. I mean, and seeing this is so different from just about any game back then. As for the style. It looks great for a Genesis game.
Yes, it looks beautiful.
They really did a great job of using those colors, those 64 colors that they can use. And there's so many games that just don't on the Genesis, and they just kind of look grody and muddy and things like that. But it really does have a great comic book look to it. All the characters are large. They're well animated. Everything just looks great. It's obviously the Genesis sound chip, so we can't really say.
Get that tin can out.
Yeah, a few times where it just I had my headphones on and it just wow, and it's go deaf instantly. But otherwise, I mean, this is they hit a home run on the Genesis as far as looks go, and just how much fun it is to watch even. The little things they do, like sometimes like if you hit an enemy really hard, he'll actually break through the panel and go into the next panel, and you can see like the paper ripping and things like that. There's so many cool things that they did with this game, and it's really like Battletoads. Even as hard as it is, it's almost impossible to hate it just because of how neat it is.
No, I mean, it is impossible to hate it because I kept coming back. I figured the next playthrough would be the one where I would get through a certain point. No, it is, for a Genesis title, it's one of the better looking Genesis games. I think where most people point head shakingly enough towards games like Vector Man, kind of as a showcase for the Genesis. No, this is it. This is probably, with the exception of one or two others, the best looking Genesis title in the library. I love, like Jeremy said, a lot of the effects, and I wish they may have thrown in a little bit more and kind of went over the top. I mean, it's a comic book. Maybe some more things like when we reviewed Battletoads, where you had kind of the animated giant fists and giant boots and things like that. They kept it. There's some ridiculous stuff in it, but they still kept it kind of grounded as far as your offense goes. But yeah, I mean, it's worth trying. It's worth picking up and checking out, especially if you keep in mind the difficulty in it, and kind of play through knowing that you're not, unless you're a fucking wizard at it, you're not going to just breeze through. You're going to be seeing those opening screens, those opening pages several times over.
I do want to mention before we stop talking about it, Sketch himself. Even as a kid, this was the definition of trying too hard to make something cool. This guy is everything that mid-90s adults thought kids thought was cool. I mean, like you said, he's a comic book artist and he's a rock star.
Yes.
And you look at the picture of him, and he's this buff white dude with jean shorts past his knee and high tops above the ankles and big socks.
Very tiny sunglasses. Though.
Very tiny sunglasses. He's got this pulled back blonde hair into a ponytail and got a jean jacket on that's cut off at the bicep or shoulders or whatever. And he just looks ridiculous. I mean, it's everything that I loved about just having all those characters back in the early mid 90s, how much attitude they had to have.
It looks like you'd see him on a set of Pogs. That's what this guy looks like. It's that big of just kind of a 90s fucking time capsule.
It really is. And it was endearing to me to see, just I was like, man, this is just what everybody thought was cool back in the day. And I probably had several outfits that was pretty close to Sketch there, but I unfortunately wasn't a rock star, but he had me beat in that regard.
Well, even just when you're playing through the levels, he says things. I mean, the characters say things. When you're fighting guys, they'll say things. When you first come into fight a certain character, it'll say like, "Oh, that's Sturgill," or whatever his name, the other enemy's name is, because these are all his characters he's created. But then there's other times like when you use the fist the first time, you turn into a superhero or whatever, and you cause all this damage. It comes back. He's like, "What the F was that?" But of course, it's all like charactered out. He doesn't say the F word, but it's the same. He's just full of attitude. He's full of energy. He's got, he knows he's in a comic, and he's gonna make sure he's cool. Yeah, it is really trying too hard to hit it with the kids. Come on, kids, isn't this guy cool? But what I liked about this game is that once I realized it wasn't a straight brawler, which when I read it for the first 5 or 6 times, I treated it that way, and it wasn't enjoyable at all. Every room is a puzzle. Sometimes that puzzle is fighting, but every room is a puzzle. And so if you actually, and I don't normally recommend the way to play a game is to save state it, because that seems not fun. But in this game specifically, if you save state a level at the start of the level, maybe not every screen. That's not fun. But the start of the level, you're still going to take a long time to get through each of those levels, and at least you have a chance. And you still may have to start over from the beginning because, like we said, it doesn't refill your health in between the non-boss levels. So you could get through level 3, let's say, with a sliver of life. When you get to level 4, and the first thing you have to do is fight 3 people or whatever, you're not going to get through it. You're going to have to restart it, whatever. But you'll get better and better each time as you're playing it that way. I found it made the puzzles that were, unfortunately, towards the end, there's a lot of things where you have to blow things up by being extremely careful not to get close to them. And so if you screw that up, you got to start all over again. So it made it so if I only had to go back 3 or 4 panels as opposed to going back 20 minutes of a perfect run where I don't accidentally fall in a hole while trying to jump, because the jumping controls aren't terrible, but it's still easy to accidentally walk off the side of a cliff when you're trying to jump. It makes it so it was more doable. And so then right this morning before we recorded this, I wanted to do another shot at see how far I could get. And I got through the first 2 areas, beat the first boss, got well into the 4th area before I made just a literal mistake where I just jumped down when I didn't mean to, down a hole, immediately died, had to start over again. I was like, well, but I wouldn't have even imagined getting that far. When we started playing this for the podcast, I got through 3 panels and I died. And I was like, this game is impossible. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I can't get these fights down. I can't figure out what to do where I'm getting hurt for no reason until I realized you get hurt by punching boxes. I enjoyed figuring out each room. I just didn't enjoy that sometimes that meant I had to play through 20 minutes to get another shot at that room. And the end of the game, if you play all the way through to the end of the game, so 6 levels, 3 bosses. Again, once you're good, it's half an hour, but if you're not good, it's probably closer to an hour to get that far. You get to the last boss, and he's kind of got a built-in timer. While you're trying to fight the last boss, and he summons little helper enemies, and generally isn't too difficult, except that you have to beat him quickly because he's captured your helper character and is slowly getting her drowned in a tank that's slowly filling with water. So if you don't beat him by the end of that timer, you do beat him, and you do get an ending, but it's clearly a bad ending, and it's kind of like, why don't you try to go a little faster next time? So you're rewarded for, fighting through this, getting lucky on a bunch of things that you probably could accidentally die from, get all the way to the end, and then, you're 10 seconds too late because of just randomness as far as where the boss goes in the room to make sure you can actually hit him or not. And then hopefully, you get the good ending finally after your 2nd or 3rd try on that. It still means you've spent way more time than I could have imagined spending on the cart version of this game. It is beautiful. It is, for a Genesis game, the music is not bad, but again, that doesn't mean that it's good. It just means it's not ear-splittingly bad. But there are so many cheap ways to kill you instantly, and the penalty for trying something inventive and failing is death. It's not like it rewards you for being inventive. If you don't know exactly what you're supposed to do through most of these rooms, that's it. There's a section where it's over lava, and that was my least favorite part of this game because I would be flying through the stage doing great, and if you accidentally, let me just miss a jump, or you're fighting a guy and he kind of, it's the monster you're fighting there spits this acid that you can normally dodge, but if not, it bounces off the back wall, and if it hits your back, it shoots you forward. So you'll be doing really well trying to dodge these things. You make one mistake, it hits you forward, you fall in the lava, it takes off over a third of your life in one shot, and then you better get out in one jump, or when you land again, there's another third of your life. There's so many spots in the game where if you could be doing a great job. You know the rooms, you know what you're doing, you're fighting well, because the combat's not incredibly inventive, but you do have to kind of pay attention to where they're blocking. And then, boom, just one mistake, all it takes, and all your progress is wiped out. You might as well just hit reset and start over again. So yeah,
I will say, like, one thing that they actually do, the puzzles and stuff like that, and making your way through the levels, it can be frustrating, but at least there are those sections, we kind of mentioned it before briefly, where you can choose a different path through the level. It kind of gives you, when you get to the end of a panel, it's like, here's a couple of different arrows that you can proceed to one panel or another panel. And it's not just a room or two. It's almost like an entirely different way through the entire level or the page. So if you're having trouble one way, it might go a long way trying a different path through that level, because some levels, definitely the one path is much harder than the other path, and it can actually help to experiment and try a different path here and there. But even there, I think it's more about finding the optimal path through the level where you take the least amount of damage, because that is the one thing that kept holding me back through the entirety of this game and how far I got was no matter what I did, I was still at the very end, I was taking damage in areas where I wasn't even hitting an enemy, or an enemy wasn't hitting me. I was hitting boxes or something like that. So, I mean, I'm sure there's not, like I said, there's an optimal path through this game, and that's probably the best way of just experimenting with the different paths and seeing which way you lose less health, which area has less one-hit deaths of jumping to your death or something like that. Because that they're usually in each section of the game, these different paths.
I was talking with Billy about this earlier, and he mentioned that at the end of the boss at the end of the first level, he's like, "Oh yeah, and you use that fire can to kill him." I didn't do that. I found a place to stand where I could kind of safely stand here and punch a bunch, and it timed out perfectly where he wouldn't get off his attack, and I was out of the range of his slash attack. But then I watched online, and you can jump to the other side of the screen, and there's a can. You push the can towards the boss, who shoots fire. The can lights on fire, and then you can push the can under him to just keep hurting him over and over again until he dies. The fact that little things like that are in this game is why this game is cool and why I enjoyed playing it. I like when there's little things like that, or when I would go to rooms that I couldn't figure out, what I'm supposed to do to get out of the room of getting hurt, and remembering, I can drop the rat on the ground, and he runs around, eventually finds a little thing, rips off part of the page, and here's a grenade. Now I can use that grenade to open that door and not have to take all that damage. Like, there's lots of little cool puzzles that you can get through. You can either brute force them, or you can find a little more inventive ways, and the multiple paths is always nice to make the game have a little more replayability. Just a really cool game if you're willing to kind of, I don't want to say save state cheat your way through it, because that's no fun, but maybe the beginning of each level. That way you don't have to go back and spend 15-20 minutes just to try a room again. Much more enjoyable. It's definitely, like you said, Billy, one of the most beautiful looking games on the Genesis. And if you have any of these Sega collections as on there, give it a try. Don't just try it once, get frustrated that it's too hard and or not interesting. For the first few panels it really isn't, but it does definitely turn around. It's a cool game. I am surprised they didn't try to do any sequels to this whatsoever. I mean, I guess it didn't sell incredibly well, but it did well enough to be in all these collections, and it is a Sega property. But it's cool. It's worth trying, and it's something different on a system that has a lot of games that play like RoboCop vs. Terminator. So it's nice to have something that doesn't.